Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and you take time to listen into the podcast and now watch the podcast. We recently launched on YouTube and we're gradually building our YouTube channel so you can check us out there. And because you've been listening over the past 3 years, you have helped us get ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to listennotes.com. So thank you for listening in, and I'm so glad you're here. All right, so now today I'm talking with Diana Peterson-More. And Diana is a best-selling author, speaker, strategic planner, coach, and so much more. And she is the author of many books, but the one I will mention right now is Can't We All Just Get Along? Courageous Communication and the Return to Civility. Welcome, Diana Peterson-More.
Thank you, Dr. Robin. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And you have such a rich and varied and meaningful bio. I couldn't go through all of it. So why don't we just start off with you start telling us first about you and then about the work you do.
Okay. Well, I happen to be a native Angelino, which is pretty amazing in this day and age. Born and raised here. I went to UCLA as an undergrad and I graduated and thought, oh, now what do I do? And I went to law school. I was a practicing employment lawyer for a number of years, and then, like many in that field, moved into human resources and now what's called organizational development consulting. So I do a lot of team facilitation, coaching, strategic planning. Really, I'm fascinated by what motivates people. So I'm really into the business of how do I help people achieve their full success? How can I make suggestions or offer very easy to implement pragmatic solutions to move forward? So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I love that. And you and I are both in Los Angeles. And for the people who are not in Los Angeles, they might have heard that nickname, Angelinos. That's the term
Oh,
that we use
yes.
locally. Yes.
Oops.
I love it. We just gave them an inside tip right there.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Okay, so you've been writing many books, but let's talk about the one that is coming out at around the time of this podcast, depending on when people are listening to this episode. If you're lucky enough, it's out already, or it may be coming soon, depending on when you're listening, or it may have been out for a while. Again, depending on when you listen to the episode. So tell us about that book, the one I'm making a reference to.
Absolutely. As you so aptly said, the first comment to the book, really, or the title is Can't We All Just Get Along? Which is something Rodney King said. For those of you who remember that really heinous episode, I currently live in Pasadena, have lived in Altadena, Pasadena just south of Altadena, and that was where Rodney King lived at the time. So it was of critical importance to those of us there. But I think what really spawned this book ultimately and what motivated me was the fact that a man who had been so savagely beaten by police, who at the point in time in which he made the comment had not been held accountable in any forum, had the inner strength and the compassion and the love to call on Angelinos, here we go again, to calm what was then really civil unrest. It's been called everything from riot to civil unrest to a fairly benign reaction, but it was an interesting time to be living here. And Rodney King, having said what he said with love, compassion, and forgiveness, put us all to shame.
Yes, yes. I do remember that and think about the compassion that he expressed at a time when, he could have just done the opposite. Yeah.
Yes, he could have.
Yeah.
He could have added fuel to the fire, as it were.
All right. So with that compelling title of your book, and we hear you talk about reflect on some of the backdrop of the title and that Rodney King incident. Tell us the main message of the book.
Well, the main message, it's really called, the subtitle after that is Courageous Communication, a Return to Civility. It was my desire to weigh in on the lack of civility in the public square. And what was really fascinating about it is that it challenged my own beliefs. I sent out 3 back-to-back surveys, one in 2019, not 1919, 2019, 2020, 2021. And it was really a focus on, very simple. It went out internationally, and there were questions that had to do with what people's worldview was, what they thought about people who had a different worldview. And I mean, Robin, I was 100% sure that I would find out that people who described themselves with different worldviews would think that others who had opposing worldviews were either wrong, gullible, or just missed the boat. And each and every survey, and by the time I concluded, there were over 2,500 people who had responded, said that, oh, I just think they're different. And I kept thinking, no, people must be in denial. And then I thought, wait a second, Diana, maybe the fact is that what dominates in the public square is all this rancor and people fighting, and all you have to do is go onto social media. People aren't very nice to one another. Maybe that's really 39% of the population or less, and that most of us really do want to heal the wounds. So after struggling with how I was going to write this book and having several false starts, I went back to kind of a tried and true chapter by chapter suggestions that have to do with how we might begin to heal the divide. And there are things like, I'm a big believer in managing conflict and not resolving conflict. Has to do with how do you combat the lizard brain being that kind of emotional reaction. How do we, and this is kind of a phrase from the law, assuming facts not in evidence, how we make assumptions about other people. And then there's a chapter on facts versus opinions. So it's been an interesting journey, and hopefully it'll be helpful for the readers. Certainly it's been a helpful journey for me. Part of why I do what I do is I like to learn. And I kind of say each and every day, what have I learned today? And what am I going to do differently tomorrow based upon what I learned today? One of my adages, which my daughter repeated to me, is that we all grow old, but we only grow up if we challenge ourselves to each and every day. So.
I love that. I love that. Sounds like your daughter has been listening to you.
Yes. Much to my surprise, I might.
Your efforts have not been in vain. All right. Do you feel like you have a sense of purpose in your own work and what you're doing?
Yes, I do. As a practitioner of organizational development, I was originally a consumer, and I was involved in a variety of programs with my employers, and I often would walk away with an aha moment. Somebody would say something, and it wasn't necessarily the leader of the group, it could have been somebody else. And I would have an aha moment that would really be life-changing. And so my goal was to facilitate, either in a group or individuals, so they could have an aha moment. That's really what turns me on more than anything else. And as I say, if I'm in front of a group, I'm a trained facilitator. It could be something someone just thought based on a comment. It could be Robin could be in the group and something Robin said. Sometimes it's something I might have said. And I just, my purpose is, I kind of think of it as a mill pond, which is a very placid lake. And then I throw in a rock, and then there's a ripple effect. So that's what I aim to do. And knock on wood, the feedback I get is that I pretty much am able to accomplish that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so we heard in your bio, or you mentioned it, or maybe I read it, and it came from somewhere that you started as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so now we're at this point where you're dropping pebbles in the pond. Tell us about the journey there. And was that a place of purpose? Did you stumble across where you came, or was it sort of a strategic plan and you're right where you set out to be?
this is where it gets into the personal and the professional. I married a law school classmate, and I was pregnant my last year of law school, which was difficult at the beginning, but it also forced me into a kind of discipline that, left to my own devices, I probably wouldn't have had. So I ended up taking a job in a management labor firm because it was small. And then the firm broke up. And then I was recruited to a large Southern California Edison company, which is the large electric utility here, into the labor law group, which was bringing the practice in-house. And then I made what I say is a meteoric rise to the glass ceiling. I sort of went from, I was the first lawyer to be promoted outside of the law department, and believe it or not, the first female in the human resources arena. So I kind of went from one job to another job, and my last position there was elected the corporate secretary. And in those days we had monthly meetings, and there were 18 officers, 17 men and me. And as I'm fond of saying, I made a meteoric rise to the glass ceiling. So, some of it was just opportunities were there and I took them. And it also had to do with the ages of my children.
Okay, so you had this amazing rise to the top, and then what happened?
Well, then what happened was I decided that I didn't want to be a generic utility officer. I really wanted to get into the people business more fully, because I had gone from HR to healthcare. We were self-funded and administered corporate secretary. And I was recruited to the Times Mirror Company, and the Times Mirror Company was the enterprise level of a whole bunch of companies. So there were a newspaper group, a TV group, a magazine group, a training company group. And I say that because I became a trained Zanger Miller facilitator while I was there. Magazines, books, media. And then Times Mirror came apart. And I remembered thinking about what I wanted to do. And it was very interesting. I decided, okay, I had always reported to men. They were always older than I was. And the people business was never really as important as I certainly thought it was. So I put together a job description of what job I would want. And it was like the chief people officer, reporting to someone my age or younger, preferably a woman. A little bit of travel, but not a lot. And I had different people looking for jobs for me. And every time, Robin, I'd go on an interview, I'd find a reason not to take the job. And finally, I thought, maybe it's time to strike out on your own. I must say I was a little bit afraid, because at that point I was a single mother with 3 children. But I also decided that what I wanted to do and being happy was more important than what I was weighing it against was financial security. And I'm still sitting in the same house, but I thought to myself, if, it's just a house, and if I have to sell it, I have to sell it. And knock on wood, so far, I haven't had to sell it. So I branched out and started consulting, and the rest, as they say, is history.
That's amazing. I love that you followed the parts of you, because you were trying to put the pieces of your work and you into a position, and then you said, I'll make this my own work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I'm hoping it's inspiring people who are thinking about possibly where they are, if they want to stay there. And I think that's a lesson to do that. You could stay there or you could move, you go into your own business or not. But the lesson that you just taught us is think of all the parts of you that make up the things you want to do the most. And then that.
Yes, exactly. And I was fortunate. And one of the first consulting jobs I had was really a pre-downsizing position. And the product that I used at the time was called Envision Your Future. And it was really fascinating. It had all of the participants. And of course, to facilitate, I needed to go through it myself. And it had all the participants kind of identify what their values were, what their skill sets were. Not only were they good at, but they wanted to use them. Because let's face it, there are a lot of things that each of us can do that we never want to do again. Were there any other environmental factors? Anyway, she went through this process of distillation, and at the very end, you kind of ended up with, these are my 3 values. These are the 3 skill sets that I am proudest of, good at, and want to continue to do. These are other issues that I want in a workplace. And they could be environmental, like, do I want to work inside, outside? Do I want to drive? Or it could be, in my case, it was, I wanted to travel once a year internationally. My youngest daughter was in grammar school, and I wanted to have the flexibility to go to her programs, which I often was not able to do with my 2 older children. The third one was that I wanted to ski annually, and that didn't happen, but the other 2 did, actually. And it was a fascinating process. And I realized, what I really realized, Robin, is that going through the process about values, one of them was economic security. And that didn't even hit my radar screen. And then I sat back and I thought, if I'm not really valuing economic security, maybe I'm just afraid to go out on my own. So I gave myself a year to do it, thinking I can still go back in and take that one last, big corporate job. But by the end of that year, I was off to the races.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And we get to reap the rewards of all your work from that point to this.
Well,
That-
hopefully, yeah,
that you
it's
have-
based on observation and experience. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, and it's still meaningful, I might add.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I have to add that. Okay, all right. Do you think it's important to have a sense of purpose for you personally or for people in general? If so, why? And if not, why not?
Yes, and you mentioned strategy before. I've always kind of been a strategic thinker, and I think each of us needs to say, where do I want to be in 3 years, or where do I want to be in 5 years? And what do I need to do to get there? And then to figure out a path to get there. I'm going to be doing a conference in Los Angeles at the end of April that's called, own your life. What next job do you want? Because I find so many employees who are unhappy, and I do a lot of coaching, and basically no one's requiring them to stay there. And I will often say to someone, gee, it sounds like you're really unhappy. If I were you, I might be looking for a different job. And they're like, did someone tell you to say that? And I'll say, no, I'm just listening to what you're saying. And nobody's holding you here. And maybe there's a better place for you. Have you considered other options? So in a way, it's not only giving permission to do it, but it's also kind of saying, you know what, you are responsible for your life. You are responsible for your career. Set a path and work to get there, recognizing that life isn't perfect or linear. So sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 behind, 3 steps forward, 2 behind, but eventually you get there. Or I think the other thing I've learned in life is that sometimes finding out what you don't want helps steer you in the direction of what you do want. So, I mean, to me, failures are just lessons learned.
Yes, I've learned that in my own journey, in my own career journey, just kind of checking off the things I don't want to get to the things I want.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
like you, now I've gotten to a point where, I have purpose in my life and work and know how to do it at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it comes from kind of eliminating what I didn't want. Yeah.
Yeah. I almost think of it, those cars little kids have that, like a bumper car, they'll be going up to a wall, they hit the wall, and then they turn and go someplace else. That's kind of the visual I get.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining it. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
not that way. Oops,
Yeah.
that
Well,
way.
let me try this way. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, that works. Yeah.
Oh, there's a wall there. Yeah, I love that. All right. So what would you say is a part of your business, career, professional life that reflects a part of who you are?
Well, I think that according to my mother, and I don't remember any of this, but when I was little, we used to play school, and I was always the teacher. And she said there'd be a group of us in the backyard, and I would be kind of telling everybody what to do. I don't think of myself now so much as telling people what to do, but pulling out knowledge from them. So a facilitator, I mean, the root word is facile, which is easy. So I'm a believer that people have the answers. It's just a matter of teasing them out. And so again, it's for me, I get great joy in working with people who have aha moments. And so I suppose that's kind of something that's always been of interest to me. And I'm also very fascinated by what motivates people. And again, most of it's through observation, but then confirmation by conversations.
Yes,
And
yes.
a lot of this has just led me to the chapters that I write in book. I mean, my current Amazon a bestseller is called Consequential Communication in Turbulent Times, A Practical Guide to Leadership. And it's really based on my experiences personally, working with others, and through observation. So, as an example, one of the chapters is begin with the end in mind, which is something that Stephen Covey, one of his 7 habits of highly successful people. And begin with the end in mind to me is being strategic. It's figuring out where you want to be, and then how do you go about getting there. And I think a lot of it's about self-empowerment, I suppose, and having people realize that at the end of the day, all of us are responsible for our own lives.
Yeah.
And this is what kind of bleeds into the next book. And it's how we treat ourselves, how we treat others, what we say. I mean, we are in control of that. And I think of that on a world scale, that we are capable of being peaceful. Humanity is capable of being peaceful, but it really is kind of one person at a time. And I think of some historical references. Remember when there was, for a long time, Ireland and England were at it, and it was a group of women, a group of mothers who got together, which has also been going on in Israel and Palestine, or Palestinians, I should say, prior to what's happening in currently, I should say. But it's this notion that it really starts with conversation. It really starts with, we all have the same hopes, dreams, and aspirations. We want roof over our head, food in our bellies. We want our children to have a better life than we have. And that's like universal. So if we start by recognizing that in one another, maybe it's inherent idealism, I don't know, but whatever it is that I'm doing now feeds my soul.
Yeah, yeah. And it started with little Diana leading the head of the class in the background.
Yeah.
All right, so this podcast is for what I call high achieving women. And each episode, I give my definition of high achieving women for those who haven't heard it, because it can mean lots of different things to different people, right?
Yeah.
High achieving, ambitious, goal oriented, responsible. And by the way, any combination of these, one or more of these things. And as I mentioned, responsible, good at a couple things, may have written a book like in your case or more. People come to them in their professional lives and ask for advice. I mean, it could be related to their area of expertise or not, but they're the one that they come to for advice. And even in the home life with family and extended family and friends and all, they come to them and just ask for advice. And so they're supporting all the time, right? And because they're good at a couple of things, people think, well, they don't need support. So I thought, well, who supports them while they're supporting everyone else? And so with that same woman in mind, she is now in a place in her work where she's feeling unfulfilled. Like there must be more to this. There has to be more to all this work that I've done. And she's not having a sense of meaning and purpose. So now with that woman in mind, take anything from your vast experience in life and work, and give her a tip or a piece of advice as we share together.
That's so interesting, Robin. I haven't thought about it in a while, but I was honored when I did work in corporate America to often be the quote top woman. So I was sent on a bunch of programs. And I went on a program for high achieving women. I was partnered up with somebody who was not dissimilar to you in terms of background. And we had various sessions. And one of the sessions was on what do you do to take care of yourself? And as everybody went around the room, and it was everything from manicures and pedicures to bubble baths to taking a walk on the beach to dining out to reading a book. It came to me and I realized I was doing none of those things. So I then made a commitment to myself about starting to do some of those. Believe it or not, I'd never had a massage at that point. I had never had a manicure and pedicure. I do both of those things now. I'm in 2 book clubs because I really do enjoy reading. So I kind of couldn't figure out at first, and I realized that there was a part of me that felt guilty about self-care. And I'm sure there are many other women, certainly not in the group I was in, but I remember sitting there thinking, why have I not given myself any of these gifts back to me? And I just, for whatever reason, and I don't know where it came from, I'm sure it was probably something in my childhood, but I just felt like I was either undeserving or selfish or guilt-ridden or something, but not any longer. But I think it's important to figure out what really makes you feel good. And I did realize that when I was an undergrad at UCLA, I lived in Santa Monica, which was relatively close to the beach. And I used to love to go in the fall or winter. I would bundle myself up and kind of go in the evening for a walk. And that came back to me. And it was something I hadn't done in, I don't know, a couple of decades or something. So I started doing that again. And there's a lot of things that we can do that are not costly. Some of them are, but we deserve it. And I think it's coming to grips with that, especially for overachieving women. And when you said ambitious, by the way, I went to Venice High School, if you're familiar with the area, and I was elected most ambitious in my high school class. And in those days, that was the real double-edged sword. Because if you were ambitious, you were aggressive. And in those days, if you were the A word, you were the B word. So there's always been a little bit of push-pull around that with me, although not so much anymore. In fact, a lot of women my age will say they're assertive. I now say I'm aggressive. I'm okay with it. Yeah.
I love that you came to terms with that.
Yeah.
And that I make a distinction, but to your point, many high achieving women are overachieving, but it's interesting when I talk to other people about the podcast and I say high achieving and they think overachieving. But I think there's a distinction between high achieving, like you embracing it's okay to be ambitious. It's good. In fact, if it's, in my opinion, if it's in us, it's a part of who we are.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong when we're being who we are.
And, I don't think we say that about men. We don't say men are overachievers.
Never.
And I still think that we as women have come a long way, but there's still a ways to go.
Yes, there is. And I think the difference between high achieving and overachieving, we may need some more balance. Or, and people have debates about having balance, but you get the idea. But I appreciate your journey and how you've come to the point of embracing. You embraced it. And particularly coming out of Venice High School at the time that you did when it wasn't really celebrated to be ambitious necessarily.
Yes, it
All
wasn't.
Right.
It really was kind of the double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Well, Diana, you have been so generous with your time and your experience and your thoughts and your wisdom. And before we tell people where they can reach you, is there anything I've not asked you that bubbles up in your mind, in your heart, If not, okay, but if there's anything you want to say, oh, I have one more thing. This is your
No,
time.
I'm chuckling a little bit because there's something they say about lawyers who are litigators, is that there's one argument they say in the car on the way to court, there's another argument they say in court, and then there's a third argument they say on the way home, and that's the best argument. I'm glad you asked that question, and I smile because I asked that question. I'll always say to people, what else? What else have we not discussed? But believe it or not, I think this was a pretty fulsome conversation, Robin. So thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here and being gracious with your wisdom and all the work that you're doing. Really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you.
All right, so imagining there might be someone saying, hey, how can I hear more from Diana? Where can they be in touch with you?
Well, one is my website, and that is a little bit difficult because my name's not spelled as most people think. The More and Peterson-More is M-O-R-E. And the Diana is like, when Princess Diana was alive, people always got it because it's the exact same Diana. But since she's passed away, that's not always the case. So it's www. And it's DianaPetersonMore.com, one word. So it's DianaPetersonMore.com. There's no hyphen. However, I do blog quite a bit. And sometimes when I'm looking for a blog, I'll go onto Google and just put my name in, and it does come up with the hyphen, the Diana Peterson-More blog, and it'll come up. Believe it or not, I have to do that from time to time when I can't find something.
That's a good way to get to it quickly.
Yeah, it is.
Well, we'll be sure to put your website link in the show notes. And again, thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom with us today.
Well, thank you.
Okay, everyone, I'd love to hear your response to the episode. Head on over to our website, leadershippurposepodcast.com, leadershippurposepodcast.com, and we'll have more resources there. If you're looking for more meaning and purpose in your own work, you can head on over there. Or if you just want to drop a message in social media, I'm on all social channels at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. So if you head over there, you'll get your quickest response. Either way, I'll respond to you, and I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.